Hello, and welcome to Woman with Bunny Ears, a Twin Peaks podcast, Season 1, Episode 4, where we will be discussing The Great Gatsby, the book. I am your host, the Green Light, Flashy Man. Joining me today is your co-host, Orgastic Future, Jason.
Hello.
A very special guest, Boat Against the Current, TracingWoodgrains.
How's it going?
And a beautiful little fool, the Sultan of Swing.
Hi.
Thank you all for coming here. So I sort of convened this podcast because, Trace, you have been, I think, very well known for publicly dissing The Great Gatsby. I believe at one point you implied it invalidated the entire Western canon, the fact that people think The Great Gatsby is good. And I'm very curious to hear what you think about that, and I don't expect to convince you otherwise or be convinced otherwise, because that's not really how appreciating things works in my experience. But I do think The Great Gatsby is good, and I thought I would start off by saying why I think The Great Gatsby is good. First of all, because that's sort of the usual position, and second of all, because it will bother me if I don't, and I'd never get around to it. And third of all, because I'm reading off a piece of paper, and it's raining, and this piece of paper will eventually fall apart in my hands. So I guess I will start off that way, if that's all right with everybody. The Great Gatsby is one of my favorite books. If you were the sort of person to make a list of your top 10 books, which I am, it would be on my top 10 list, which it is. I think it's a beautifully written book. The prose is just a pleasure to read. I also am a fan of how about every page it seems like he makes up a word, because he's using all this weird jazz age slang that doesn't make any sense to me. I also think it's interesting how F Scott Fitzgerald, apparently, he said to himself, what if I actually wrote a really good book? And then he did, and thus history was made. But I also think the plot of The Great Gatsby, as it were, is very engaging. I think it's a very beautiful meditation on love. You have this guy, Nick Carraway, and he shows up and he meets this mysterious stranger, the Great Gatsby, who's just kind of a guy doing his own thing, and he falls in love with this character. And meanwhile, and that's that's not like a romantic love, but it is like he's in love with this man. And then you also have the Great Gatsby is in love with, pining after, Daisy, who is already married to a man that she doesn't really seem to love. And there are many characters in many sorts of relations to each other that have interesting amounts of love for each other. And that's what I think makes it the Puella Magi Madoka Magica of novels. And it's just pretty great in general. So that's my statement. And I'd like to hear... I guess I will add that I didn't read this in high school. I read it a couple of years ago, but I assume that not having read it in high school enhanced my enjoyment of it. But I was wondering what thoughts you had on this book, Trace.
Why, what an excellent question. All right. So my thoughts on The Great Gatsby. You say if you had a top 10 list of books, which you do, it would be on it, which it is.
I caveat that I have not read every book.
I mean, that's on you. And I
it
expected better of you, but right. Anyway, if I had a bottom 1 list of books, which I do,
wow,
it would be on that list.
Oh, dang.
And I need to emphasize that I do think it is valuable as a service to others to have strong opinions about what your favorite and least favorite in a category are. And a lot of people leave off the least favorite, but describing what you did not like is at least as important a way of showcasing your good taste and letting others know what they should think about the world than knowing what you do like. And in this case, I feel very strongly that not only should The Great Gatsby be considered a mediocre book, mediocre to bad, it should be specifically and directly derided as a book, because it directly and comprehensively fails to do the things any good book should do, while doing a great deal of the things every good book does not do.
Ooh, say more.
It is a non-story, told by a non-narrator about characters the author hates in a world the author hates, doing nothing. There is nothing redemptive about that. You see this man come in who is deliberately made to be a blank slate. Fitzgerald doesn't write this man with any personality at all. He just has him come in to watch things, to watch other people do things. And what do? Really nothing. The whole book is about them doing nothing. It is about them driving around and going to parties and talking at parties and moaning about each other and moaning about the world. And it is about Fitzgerald snidely sliding in the reasons you should dislike every character that he's writing about and the reasons why their world and their place in it is shallow and bad. It's just this book written by what feels like a misanthrope who wants to take it out on the rest of us and doesn't even have the decency to be entertaining in his story in the meantime. But what makes it not just a regular mediocre book, but a superlatively terrible book isn't any of that. It's that the man actually has some writing talent and he spent it on this. It's that you can go through and you can pick out some lines from it and say, you know, that's a really clever line. You know, that's a really clever way of putting things. You know, that's a good hint of symbolism right there. He has some of the ingredients. The thing that makes this book a travesty is that this man was clearly capable of producing something great, and instead he produced Gatsby. And that is unforgivable.
Interesting appraisal of the Great Gatsby. You make it seem like such a boring book.
It's extraordinarily boring.
But it's also
one of the most boring books I've read.
It's also quite short as books go. So I found, not that many things happen in The Great Gatsby, but it's not like we spend a long time on the things that aren't happening. It's just, occasionally there's a chapter, something happens. Chapter isn't that long.
As the case may be.
Or doesn't happen, as the case may be. You get a mix of the two. And then you move along. I don't know if I was going anywhere with that.
Well, it sounds like, if you were going somewhere, it sounds like an odd place to go, which is an argument that nothing happens, but it's a short nothing, so that's fine.
I'm saying,
I don't know, that's
what
I'm hearing.
Not much happens in the book, but the book isn't that long. So on like a proportionality scale, enough things happened at least to keep me being excited about what was going on.
And what for you, what does the plot of Great Gatsby excite in you? What are you impressed by about the plot of it, the storyline specifically?
I don't think I can answer that question as it was put to me, but I'll try to answer maybe a related question if I can think about what I could say that would make any sense. Well, I would say that it has sort of the standard density of new things occurring in the plot, which is enough to keep some readers like myself engaged. Like, first you get introduced to the main character, and then you get introduced just by passing to the Great Gatsby, and then you get introduced to some more characters who will sort of round off our cast of characters. And then, people start meeting each other, having interpersonal developments, backstories are revealed, confrontations are had, dramatic moments of vehicular homicide are realized. There's that whole subplot about having an affair that I should have put before the vehicular homicide. And then the tragic twist of the Great Gatsby is going to take the fall for the love of this woman who doesn't seem to really love him back. And then, in the end, is killed due to the affair subplot. And then we wind up the book thinking, what a confluence of situations has occurred here. What a tragic ending to the Great Gatsby. Gatsby of greatness.
Sure.
So does that answer your question?
I mean, you did describe more or less what happened in The Great Gatsby, yes. I'm still not sure where you appreciate that plotline, just in the sense of, I don't quite grasp what is appreciable with that plot line as you've described it?
Well, as we said in the Neon Genesis Evangelion episode, a very similar thing where we said it doesn't, or at least in my opinion, what a thing is actually supposed to quote unquote mean in terms of symbolism. I don't think that's usually the most important part of a piece. I also don't feel like the literal events of what happens in the story are usually the most important part of the story. And it's just, it's sort of a thing where you have to read it and you go like, wow, what a masterfully told story that was interesting in its details. And, well, you either enjoy it or you don't.
You do either enjoy it or you don't, but I think the specific reasons you enjoy it or you don't are compelling.
They could be. They could be.
They could be, says the man making a podcast about the reasons we do or don't. Let's hope they are.
So, Jason, what did you think of The Great Gatsby?
Well, in hearing your defense of it, I think I'm definitely not as taken with it. I have neither a top 10 or bottom 1 list, but if I did, it would be in neither of the lists. It's, it's a good, not great book. But I think you are right to defend it somewhat in terms of like the literal events of the book are not particularly interesting, but under that there is a sort of, there are many themes and the themes are done well. And I think the theme I enjoy the most is the theme of status and let's say male hierarchy and sort of how the connection between fantasy and reality. And again, while the plot line itself is sort of meh, at any individual kind of choice made in the story and how it's constructed, you have this blank main character who has no personality besides kind of being a closeted gay Yale snob. He's rather fascinating, I think, to me, in contrast with the other characters. They're all sort of these caricatures of ways men can present themselves, and you can see in their interactions I guess just kind of a caricature of status and how empty it can be, and how they each sort of retreat into their own little ways of feeling superior to the rest of the world. Nick with his intellect and his snobbishness, Tom with his physicality and his old money, and Gatsby with his fake persona and kind of trying to rob Tom, and kind of, they go about mogging each other. It's kind of this big pissing contest until it all explodes and them trying to get Daisy to admit that, she never loved the other one. And then in that is tied, these subplots where it's what ends up being Gatsby's undoing is kind of this, minor affair that Tom was having with some, disposable weak man, who married a woman above his station. And, somehow I think they say it explicitly in the book where he describes Tom and Daisy as people who it's like they leave a path of destruction wherever they go. And then they just kind of retreat into their own resources and plenty and let other people pick up the mess. And that's kind of how it goes. But you see all these interactions upon just all the various ends of the status hierarchy. And then you just kind of watch them go. And, nothing really happens. But, even in that, there's just so many little details and turns of phrase. I feel like besides being entertaining, it's I think you can learn a lot about it, about just what it means to be a man, what it means to get your self-worth, what it means to construct an identity and live it, etc. I think all of that is very interesting and good, not great.
So you're leaning towards calling it The Good Gatsby.
Yeah.
All right. But you'd say it taught you a lot about the American dream.
Meh. I never thought that was an interesting theme. I think
no.
I'm too cynical.
Yeah.
Well, I think that cynicism is the core of the book. I don't know that there's a there besides cynicism. So like you look at this interplay between the several men, you look at the interplay between Nick and Gatsby and Tom and so forth. And at least for me, I picture this author silently standing above, judging them all and judging all the characters in it and being like, I just want everyone to know how shallow and pathetic their lives and their views are, their approaches are. That's a lot of what I get from his presentation of each of the characters.
Well, I think I might be able to interestingly disagree with you there.
Okay.
Because I think, the There are certainly some rich characters unfulfilled in their personal life, like Tom and Daisy, who make questionable choices, and one could say that they are to be looked down upon. But I think the what you might call the core of the book, which is, so there's Nick, and we aren't really given any reason to dislike Nick. We know from the beginning of the book that he's like a guy who will listen to and put up with people up to a point, as he establishes. But then he meets the Great Gatsby, or Gatsby, and he seems to think the Great Gatsby is actually pretty swell. And Gatsby is presented in the book as not being like a mean or despicable person. If anything, he's just too idealistic, and he's being battered by the realities of the world. But he's characterized in many scenes, like Nick just meets him at a party, and he just seems like this really interesting stranger. And then he's told, that's Gatsby, that's the guy whose house we're at. And he goes, wow, what a cool guy. So I don't know where you would get like cynical judging of that character from.
I mean, the whole story is about that character actually just sort of pathetically yearning after another man's wife until they're driving together and she inadvertently kills someone and he takes the fall and gets shot. Like,
wait a minute, I think I see the problem. You think that the character who is doomed in a tragedy is someone we're supposed to find despicable.
Not despicable. No, I don't think the author intends you to find Gatsby despicable. But I do think that the author doesn't think much more highly of Gatsby than he does of any of his other characters.
Mm.
Well, regardless of his opinion of the morality of the characters, I think, couldn't we establish that he at least finds either them or the story that they get in to be beautiful? Because otherwise he wouldn't ornament it the way he does.
Yes, I do think he finds the story to be beautiful, but I think he finds it to be beautiful in a way that I would describe, again, as rooted in cynicism, as the only beauty that you can find in things is taking a senseless series of events and tossing a yearning what if in, because all actual beauty would be hollow.
Mm.
Well, that could be a way of kind of steel manning it, or to use the ugliest possible term of finding great beauty in something that's very ugly or banal. That seems like an accomplishment.
I find it interesting, the point that Flashy brought up of, essentially characterizing the story as a tragedy, and in connection with Jason's point about it being perhaps more aptly titled The Good Gatsby. I guess the way I would read the title is The Great Gatsby with a question mark in parentheses after the word great. Insofar as you alluded to, it sort of, in many ways, mirrors the typical tragic narrative. You have some person in a high station, in this case, Gatsby. He suffers from some fatal flaw, in this case, an inability to let go of the past, and he's brought low by this fatal flaw, and a woman, in this case. I guess the question that The Great Gatsby really raises is, in what situation can this sort of narrative be applied to modern life, in a way? In a society without kings, like, say, Oedipus, to fail tragically, in what ways can we have a character so piteously brought low like that? And I think that it's this attempted synthesis that's why The Great Gatsby is, held up as one of the contenders for the title of Great American Novel.
I feel kind of weird here because in general, I don't actually like tragedies. But I am curious to know, Trace, do you like tragedies at all? Or do you think they're all just miserable or cynical in some way?
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I have sought out enough tragedies to be able to say much beyond, I think there's plenty of merit in Hamlet or Macbeth or so forth, which I know is the sort of bold and cutting take people come to me for. Hamlet was pretty good. But no, I don't have anything inherently against tragedies.
Okay. So it was just something about the specific construction of this one that you didn't like that made you think it was a cynical string of happenstance that was just lame.
Yes, cynical and haphazard.
Mm.
That not only was it cynical, he didn't even have the decency to be cynical while telling a decent story with it all. That it can't be enjoyed in the low sense, shall we say, of just, I want to read a story to have people do something interesting. That he wasn't, no, he was above all of that. He didn't want to present the masses a book that they could just find fun in. He wanted to present something deep and meaningful. And to do that, he had to carefully take all elements that could be construed as story out and just have a series of vignettes, a series of interactions between his carefully crafted caricatures, shall we say. It
Do you
just
think
has...
The Great Gatsby would have been improved by the addition of a couple of gunfights, for example?
Sure. I think that there is a case to be made that if it had, I don't think gunfights are the most interesting plot. That's not the sort of plot that I really am drawn towards, I would say. But sure, if it had a reason for some just casual, low fun in it, if it wasn't just stuck in this world of drifting between parties and hoping something happens, then yes, I do think that would have at least made it more readable, if nothing else.
Just a point of order, doesn't Gatsby die in a gunfight?
It's
A rather one-sided one.
It's not so much a
calling it-
gunfight as he just gets shot.
He sort of
Right,
brought a pool to a gunfight, as it were.
Right.
What I was always confused about was he was sitting on an inflatable chair, is shot, and then just goes on floating. So it implies that the bullet hit him, but did not go on to penetrate through the inflatable chair that he was sitting on.
They had shitty bullets back then.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
20s. Yeah, nothing roaring about those guns.
I realize now we've left it a little late. Sultan, what do you think about The Great Gatsby?
Well, glad you asked. You didn't actually, but as I'm sure a number of people, and probably quite a few of the people who will listen to this did, I was assigned the Great Gatsby in AP English class. And I would say, to the extent that I sort of have a positive emotional association with the Great Gatsby, it's because that particular English class was probably one of the best English classes that I've taken, insofar as having a teacher who is just, for once, really, truly very effective at inspiring a love of the English language. But I would say, as far as contenders for the great American novel, I would say I've got to prefer something like either Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn, which I read later on in life.
Also in my top 10 books, by the way.
Yes, I find it interesting that of the plausible contenders for that spot, The Great Gatsby seems to be the one that people most commonly identify as having been forced to read in high school. I don't know how many high schools still assign Moby Dick anymore, which is a book that I still have yet to get around to. And
I think
obviously,
I'd hate that one also, by the way.
yes. And it seems like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn are mostly controversial because of their uses of the N-word. But I would say as far as liking or disliking the novel itself, I can't say it's the kind of thing that I would necessarily read for pleasure. That is, having already read it, I can't specifically say I would particularly be inclined to go back to it. But what I find to be the most interesting question in the novel, which I alluded to earlier, was the question mark in parentheses besides the word great, i.e. the question of how is it that we evaluate greatness in America? Is it from having a lot of money and spending it on conspicuously opulent things? Is it from being old money and sort of having some sort of legacy to your name that you can lean on? If not that, then what? Like, what higher ideal do we aspire to as a society?
You remind me of a part in the book where I believe it's basically established that Gatsby is going to take the fall for the motor car accident, and Nick I don't know, is leaving or something, and yells at him that he's better than all those rotten lot out there. So I think by whatever character of moral worth Nick Carraway holds, the Great Gatsby is great in his eyes.
Why did he yell that? I never understood that passage.
No.
Just for kicks.
Do
Just
you-
because that's the sort of thing one yells in a great novel.
I don't understand. What do you mean, why did he yell that? Do you mean, why did he say it, or why did he yell it?
Why did he say it at all? I mean, I think like in that passage, he seems to just like he's openly saying how much like he dislikes Gatsby, at least as the narrator, and then at some point he just kind of says this thing.
Well, I think he wants Gatsby to know one of the several things that utterance is about is he wants Gatsby to know that he shouldn't be trying to play into this societal game that he's been playing into in various ways, like hosting the opulent parties and taking the fall for the car accident, because he thinks Gatsby's better than them, and Gatsby should not debase himself by engaging in that. Does that help?
Not really. And then I went to find the passage. They're talking about what happened, and he's waiting on Daisy to call him. And then he says, "They're a rotten crowd," I shouted across the lawn. "You're worth the whole damn bunch put together." I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever gave him, because I disapproved of him from beginning to end. And then it just talks about how pretty he is, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, now you know why he said it, because it was a good thing to say, and he always was happy he said his only compliment to Gatsby.
Yeah. Who he disapproved of from beginning to end.
Disapproved of him from beginning to end.
Then acted
From
as a narrator of a book
us.
about how he was great.
From the moment he saw him staring across an ocean, that's when I knew, or staring across the bay, that's when I knew that guy was bad business.
That's right.
Yeah.
On the subject of lines from the Great Gatsby, I have one to read to you guys, and I want you to explain this line to me. "Something was making him nibble at the edge of stale ideas, as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart."
Oh yeah, that's the bit where Tom is being racist, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah. Every
There's a lot
day
of those.
What's that?
There's a lot of those bits.
Yes, true. But every day I pray to God for the serenity of Daisy, where Tom is going on some rant about like white European stock dying off, and Daisy is just like, "Oh, he's going to save the white race." Every day I pray to God for the serenity to say that to people who are annoying me by going on political tirades.
So, yes.
Yes.
I'm just struck by that line specifically, just because it encapsulates the, I would say, deliberate poshness of the book for me. Is that like he's obviously, and rightly expecting the audience to be scornful of this guy, and rightfully the audience dutifully is scornful of a very scorn-worthy guy. But it's not enough just to say, this guy's worthy of scorn. You need to describe his sturdy physical egotism and his peremptory heart and so forth. It just, don't you feel like that's a bit much? That whole sentence?
Actually, I kind of like it, because I think it builds into Tom's characterization, which is developed throughout the novel, that like he kind of has it all, but he's just in his like ticker, built into him. He somehow wants to do more things, but he can't like find ways to do more things. And so like an Alaskan sled dog who cannot pull a sled, he is gnawing at his own leg. And
well, sure, that was established
yes.
already, though, when they mentioned he reached such an acute limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax.
Right. And so the, he's described as sturdy in there, his egotism particularly. And it's the same idea about, here's a man, he's very strong, he's like a tiger pacing his cage, and he's going into these stale ideas because he doesn't know what else to do. I don't know, that's my read on it.
Fair.
Any other opinions?
I mean, I didn't enjoy Tom's retreats to science. There's like I think one of my favorite little quips in the book is when Tom like finally realizes what's going on between Gatsby and Daisy, and I can just read the passage. So he's walking with Nick and Jordan, and he says, "Did you see that?" demanded Tom. "See what?" He looked at me keenly, realizing that Jordan and I must have known all along. "You think I'm pretty dumb, don't you?" he suggested. "Perhaps I am, but I have almost a second sight. Sometimes it tells me what to do. Maybe you don't believe that, but science..." He paused. The immediate contingency overtook him, pulled him back from the edge of a theoretical abyss. "I've made a small investigation of this fellow," he continued. "I could have gone deeper if I'd known." And then after that, Jordan starts saying, like, "Did you go to a medium?" And then, it all gets derailed. But I like that, in this time of, he finds out his wife's cheating on him and, just kind of everything's crumbling. It's like he immediately retreats to science, and then he can't quite, like, muster anything because it's just an identity. And then he just kind of, trails off and it gets mocked. I think it adds to his character, thin and caricature-like as it is. It's just a nice little quirk. I think
That
it has
bit's
a lot of charm to
good.
him.
I'll give you that. That line's a good line.
Science. I think it's fair to say that no characters were blinded by science in this book, however, which would be a later innovation in media.
Yes.
Never mind.
Some may be deafened by jazz, though.
True.
While I am on the subject of lines I like, I do want to add one other bit that I do quite like, or at least I linger on, which is when he is in the car with Jordan, I believe it is, when Nick is in the car with Jordan, and she's driving carelessly, and they talk about it, and he's like, "Suppose you met somebody just as careless as yourself." "I hope I never will," she answered. "I hate careless people." I do feel that line.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I feel Jordan's the sort of character who could probably have an entire book written about her professional tennis career, and hopefully that book would be written by David Foster Wallace.
Nice. I'm wondering if I should bring forth just a corner of the official Flashy Man list of criteria for judging whether a movie is good or not. And one of them is how good are the colors on the screen. But another one of them is being friends with the people on the screen. And I feel that, we have three characters who you might find interesting people to be friends with. There's Nick Carraway, there's Gatsby, and there's Jordan. And I thought they were all, in their own ways, compelling people.
How could Nick possibly be an interesting person to be a friend with? His core and, in fact, exclusive personality trait is that he is an invisible person to be a friend with.
Nah, he has some good little lines he does, and little fun questions he asks people that he comes up with in the moment. Like, what if you met someone who was as careless as you?
Sure, but that's just the sort of just blank slate line of, I need to say something because I'm a character in a story that I need to keep moving along. Let's
He could also, yell at you across the lawn about how you were really good.
Right, well, secretly thinking that you were always pretty mediocre, in fact.
Actually, you were always bad.
I really hated you, but...
When he's breaking up with Jordan and they bring up the carelessness thing again, and she's like, "Do you remember we were talking about driving a car?" And he's like, "No." And then she says, "You said a bad driver was only safe until she met another bad driver." "Well, I met another bad driver, didn't I? I mean, it was careless of me to make such a wrong guess. I thought you were rather an honest, straightforward person. I thought it was your secret pride." To which he replies, "I'm 30, I said. I'm 5 years too old to lie to myself and call it honor." She didn't answer. Angry and half in love with her, and tremendously sorry, I turned away.
Nice.
Honestly, I would say what I found the most interesting about Nick was the question of whether he was gay or not.
Ho-ho!
Insofar as there's his obvious, probably not romantic, but nonetheless fairly characterized as infatuation with Gatsby. Also a sequence that might be throwaway to the overall plot, but interesting in that it only involves Nick and one other fairly minor character. Then Mr. McKee turned and continued on out the door. Taking my hat from the chandelier, I followed. "Come to lunch someday," he suggested, as we groaned down in the elevator. "Where?" "Anywhere." "Keep your hands off the lever," snapped the elevator boy. "I beg your pardon," said Mr. McKee with dignity. I didn't know I was touching it. All right, I agreed. I'll be glad to. ... I was standing beside his bed, and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in his underwear, with a great portfolio in his hands. Beauty and the Beast, Loneliness, Old Grocery Horse, Brooklyn Bridge. Then I was lying half asleep in the cold lower level of the Pennsylvania station, staring at the Morning Tribune and waiting for the 4 o'clock train.
Nice. I think I know what the problem is. You should have read that in like an old-timey 1920s voice, and then it would have seemed perfectly above board.
I appreciate that. As you were reading that, I was looking at the Wikipedia page for Nick Carraway, and before you had gotten to the lever bit, I read, many queer interpretations of Nick's character hinge on a scene at the end of Chapter 2, in which an elevator lever is used as a phallic symbol. And I was marveling over that line for a while as you were slowly describing the circumstances by which an elevator lever came to be used as a phallic symbol.
There are more blatant phallic symbols in 20th century literature. You read for one.
That's another book that I started and could not bring myself to finish. Which is a trend with books like
I've seen half of the movie.
Oh, I'm sure we could have a phenomenal half podcast about it.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like this was perhaps my equivalent of The Great Gatsby, is in terms of being turned off of the plot by the fact that I could not stand a single one of the characters.
This is probably also my equivalent for The Great Gatsby, except that I wasn't forced to finish it, and so can't have a comprehensive opinion on it. But there's this thing that all these novelists, all these like 20th century, late 19th century popular classic novelists seemed to do, which is, just write these interminable, plotless, hulking works that exist only to try to be classics.
Hold on. You can't say The Great Gatsby is interminable or hulking.
Well, I can. It was just a very slender, interminable hulking work.
It was like She-Hulk.
Sure. Yeah, I can roll with that.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I have to say that elevator lever scene didn't jump out at me when I read the book the first time. First of all, because in my mind an elevator lever ends at like a T junction. I don't know. And second of all, I would probably hazard a guess that that's something to do with control. But maybe it is a little bit of 1920s nudge and a wink.
I mean, the whole underwear thing afterwards definitely does lead significant.
I mean, just wearing underwear, so his cock's not out.
Come on. Nick has to sleep on the lower floor,
Oh.
You can't look at your folder of ponies in full clothes. That doesn't make any sense.
Wait, did you say ponies?
Was he looking at racehorse names?
There was a portfolio of pictures. Could either be racehorse names or just artsy titles given to landscape shots. Was Beauty and the Beast, Loneliness, Old Grocery Horse, Brooklyn Bridge.
I think, a guy in the 1920s with a folder listing random sounding nouns, that's probably racehorses right there. I don't think they were leafing through artsy shots in their spare time. But what do I know? I wasn't there. I've only seen a bunch of movies.
My mind has been so poisoned by 21st century pop culture nonsense that when you said ponies, I was immediately thinking of My Little Pony and trying to figure out, of course, how. Which, by the way, I do have to say, much more of a classic than Great Gatsby.
But much more interminable. They just kept going with that one.
Sure, but each one has very bright colors. You'd like the colors, I suspect, you being a color sort of guy.
They just weren't bright enough.
Wraps up neatly in 20 minutes or so. And then you
True. And each individual episode was a greater story than The Great Gatsby.
They were.
Yeah.
Every single... I defy you to find an episode of My Little Pony that had less plot than the whole book of The Great Gatsby.
Well, I guess we know what the next episode's going to be.
It's been so long since I paid any attention to any of that. I couldn't even begin to talk about it.
We could watch the new My Little Pony movie of the next generation that came out recently.
Yes.
Did a new one come out? Oh yeah, there we go. I haven't. Again, I have moved beyond such childish things
Yes.
to new childish things.
Yes. Once I grew up, I only liked novels about the Jazz Age that were full of ennui and themes.
Yeah, which I still think reflects poor taste.
Well, we see in The Great Gatsby a very clear result of the replacement of horses with cars. Namely,
Ooh.
I think fatal horse-drawn carriage crashes were probably a bit fewer and farther between than fatal car crashes. I'm sure they happened on sheer cliffs and such, but I feel like I've yet to hear of a head-on collision between two horse-drawn carriages that left no survivors.
I don't know. Horses are pretty dangerous. People would fall off of them constantly. I'm pretty sure that the fatality rate was like an order of magnitude higher.
Huh.
Let's talk about this whole fatality thing, by the way, because this is another thing I want to whinge about in the book, is that it putters along with no plot for a good long while. And then he's like, at some point I do need something to happen in here.
Yeah.
Like, I can't just have a whole book with zero plot. And so he just has them happen to drive past her place at a time when she can happen to wander out and be like, yeah, I should go chase these guys and get hit by them. Just so the book can have one plot element, it just tosses this very unlikely and peculiar happening in, just so it can say, yeah, we had something happen here. It moved along.
I'm kind of with you there, because the plot element, it is woven into the rest of the book. Like, I believe, it's been a while, but I believe the woman who dies is like Tom's mistress.
Right, she is.
So she was, she's like relevant, and it sort of explains why she was there, and like they were driving because of the big argument that had happened just before, and so that kind of explains why they were there. But it still is like, you didn't just let the characters logically reach the natural conclusion of their premise. You threw in a crazy random happenstance in there just to end this book.
I don't know. I think that's defensible, and that really isn't the most interesting plot element in the book, nor is it the climax. Yeah. The climax is the argument that happens just before that. That's where the main plot of the book is the Daisy affair, and that's where everything comes to a head.
Yeah.
And then as they drive off, here's just like, oh, by the way, here's this other thing that happens that's like, here's all the subplots coming together in kind of a fantastical way, yes, but it's like, I don't know, it's like a minor event that frames things, and it's a way of kind of exploring the kind of consequences of, these people that have like, no regard for their actions.
And careless driving.
Well, that too, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a theme of it, and then it's like he's letting her drive. Yeah, I think the kind of randomness adds to it in a sense, because like there is kind of a thread, and then maybe Tom brought this upon himself for the affairs, or them thinking of lower status people as disposable or something. But it could also be God, because there is that scene where the lady's husband is like saying, well, like you might not think, like even if like you don't say what happens or like you don't admit it, well, like, God knows. And then he's looking out at the eyes of T.J. Ecclesburg, and then like somebody's like, that's an ad. It's not God. And then God kills her.
I do like the eyes of T.J. Ecclesburg.
Yes. It's interesting insofar as the symbolism with that billboard was rather transparent. I think it's usually used to teach the concept of symbolism in English class.
It is, yes. But to be fair, it's a good symbol. I like the idea of a worn billboard staring down at you. That's one of the things that I'll fish out of it and be like, he could have done something cool.
I also think
something that could be in something cool.
That even though, like, you read the book and the character just directly looks like at an object and says, God will judge you, as the object is a big, like, picture of a face looking down. Like, it's so on the nose, but also I read it and I'm like, yeah, that works. Dude, you did it. Good job.
I mean, I can actually appreciate a good dose of really on-the-nose symbolism. Like, you can't miss or misinterpret this. We're just going to really heave it at you. Because if it's any more subtle, I probably would have just brushed it off and been like, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
Maybe I can blow your mind with a little more subtle symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Because
you can't, but go on.
That billboard is, a great big picture of spectacles. And the guy like directly says, "Yep, that's God right there." But then also there's
And the
another
whole thing was a spectacle. Oh, wait, it wasn't.
Whoa!
Carry on.
But also, there's another character in the novel who wears spectacles, and his name is Owl Eyes, and he hangs around the Great Gatsby's party, and he says that line about how Gatsby is a regular Belasco, and he didn't go too far, and he didn't cut the pages. What can you expect? And then he's also the only guy who shows up at Gatsby's funeral besides Nick, and he takes off his spectacles and he cleans them, and he makes some comment about how Gatsby was a poor guy and feels
Sure
so
was a
sympathetic
dude.
to him. Yes, and that, my friends, is the forgiveness of God.
Whoa.
Yeah, I
He's been a guy in glasses.
was going to bring up the lonely funeral scene as, distinctive. And yet I realized as I was thinking about that it seems like all of the notable funeral scenes in fiction that I can think of tend to be lonely funeral scenes. It's probably harder to think of an iconic funeral scene that was well attended, because it's less of an impactful point to say like, oh, look, this person had tons of friends and loved ones, as opposed to, look, this person had nobody who was willing to be there for them as like a mourner rather than just a hanger-on.
The lonely funeral scene is another example of his scorn for just this whole world that he's writing about. You don't write a funeral scene like that without just having dripping scorn for every single person in that novel.
Except Owl Eyes.
Except Owl Eyes, yeah.
Well,
Owl
I mean,
Eyes
thinking of other examples, there's Death of a Salesman. Spoiler alert: the salesman dies.
You can't spoil other works in the one podcast. We have the one podcast system.
What if it's the spoiler is in the title? Like, for example, The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde.
Tread lightly, my friend. Tread lightly. That's all I'll say on the subject. You can use your own judgment.
I will say there are some books or movies where there is a spoiler in the title that does not, in fact, come true.
Yeah.
Like the Great Gatsby.
Like the Great Gatsby. Yeah. I was thinking of this ad now, but
Oh my God! I can't believe we may have to edit that one out. I don't know.
Romel also dies at the end.
Oh God! I can't. I haven't finished reading the Romel of the End series.
We've established that, but I wanted to carry on the at the end.
True.
I feel that sympathy and scorn for one's characters need not be mutually exclusive, though. Like, I would say, you wouldn't necessarily say that F Scott Fitzgerald has nothing but scorn for Gatsby.
No.
Pity, probably.
I would say he has nothing but scorn for Daisy, Tom, mostly Jordan. Nick, he's neutral on, because Nick, everyone is by necessity neutral on. Myrtle's husband. These are not characters that the author likes.
I guess I'll say another thing that is one of my perennial things about fiction, which is that people often talk about in terms of like, did the author like this character or dislike this character, or think something was contemptible or commendable. And sometimes I even say that because it's just a very easy figure of speech, but I don't really find that interesting that much. I think that's sort of a tired mode of storytelling. And if you're writing a book where the point is like, this guy was bad, it's usually not that interesting. So,
well, hold on, I'm confused. You're saying if you're having a book where the thing is, this guy is bad, it's not that interesting.
Yeah. If that's the point of the book.
Right. But I feel like that was much of the point of Great Gatsby was, look at how bad all of this is. All of this is bad.
I think the point of the Great Gatsby was observing the pathos of Gatsby's situation and his yearning and whatnot.
Well, yes, but as we've established, you have bad taste in Great Gatsby.
Oh, I see. I like the phrasing implying I have bad taste in the Great Gatsby specifically.
I don't know your taste in everything else. You might have a perfectly fine rest of your top 10.
True. I guess
you might like To Kill a Mockingbird, and that would
that's a great
good
book.
Taste. Yeah, see, there we go. There's good taste.
That's in my top 10 as well.
To Kill a Mockingbird is one book that I hated as a kid because it was so unfair. And then I grew up and liked it because it was so unfair.
Oh, yeah.
But
That's the point.
yeah, it is the point. I cried. I was angry at Kill a Mockingbird. I was furious at it when I read it when I was like 10. And then I got older and read it, and I was like, huh, yeah, well played. Great Gatsby, I just got older, and I was like, yeah, you really did grow up on that one, didn't you, old Fitzgerald? Really, should have kept that one buried in the basement where it started out. We really lost something there as society, pushing that one up to the top of our lists. Kind of sucks.
The reason I like To Kill a Mockingbird is the same reason I like Tom Sawyer. It's just a bunch of fun stories about growing up and having hijinks in the South. And then there's, the whole and that's a bummer. But you live, you learn. You keep growing up.
See, maybe that's what The Great Gatsby needed, is a lot of kids having hijinks in the South.
That's
going
true.
on around this Gatsby plotline. And that could have made the book redemptive.
There was a rather distinctive lack of children in The Great Gatsby, apart from an obliquely alluded to baby that Tom and Daisy had. That never seems
I keep forgetting.
Yes.
It's an important sort of plot consideration that they have a child, but I just keep forgetting that the child is in there because she's never referenced again.
The book has a scene where she pulls the child out, and they make commentary to that effect. Both of Gatsby sort of not being able to believe the child even exists because it was just kind of this object that they had mentioned. And then when Daisy's talking about the child, she keeps saying you got all dressed up because I wanted to show you off. And the child's like, yes, Mom. It's very meta in that sense of just how disposable and irrelevant the child is to their lives and the rest of the plot of the book.
Also the source of the "a beautiful fool" line, which is that line has several purposes and is also just a fun phrase. So there was something I was curious about, Sultan, since you did read this in high school, apparently, or in English class at least, and apparently it was involved with a teacher fostering love of the English language. And I feel like most people, they read The Great Gatsby in high school or whatever, and then they have to write tedious essays about how Owl Eyes was really the forgiveness of God or what have you. And this crushes their love of the English language. So I was wondering what you guys did with The Great Gatsby and how that contributed to your feelings. Just a personal curiosity of mine.
It's an interesting question. I would say that one thing that I quite appreciated about said English teacher was that she was very much no nonsense, that she did not hold much truck for extravagant interpretations that took complete leave of the text to spin wild theories about, that Daisy represents the new American woman, or was it the artificial human, with vague context of terms. One thing I found refreshing was that she admitted everything that you could possibly write about The Great Gatsby has already been written before, but anything that you could write about Hamlet has already been written 3 times. So it was generally, the focus was not on the originality of your take. The focus was on how well argued it was, which is something that I feel that should be the aspiration of any effective English class, is the proper organization of ideas, and not so much about defining a paper as 5 paragraphs with an introduction and a conclusion and a minimum amount of quotations from the text per paragraph.
Yeah, it still seems like a shame to me that these kids have to write these essays that they're not interested in about books that they probably aren't interested in, to be honest. But if they were interested in, I don't know, they might not be interested by the end.
So that is something I agree with you on.
Yeah,
I'll find unity with you there.
I do feel that one of the most effective ways to make a book disliked is to assign it an English class, which I suppose is a saving grace of the fact that of all the aspirants to the title of Great American Novel, it's Gatsby that usually shows up in English class, not Tom Sawyer or Huck Finn.
Well, see, I don't know that it's being assigned an English class that makes them hated. I feel like it's just being a book that isn't fun for a lot of teenagers to read that makes them hate it. Like, if you assign Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer in English class, sure, they'll have to do dreary assignments on it, but at least they'll have a rollicking good time throughout it. Like, I don't think they would suddenly not have fun with the parts that they read, at least, which there's no guarantee how much they would read, if they had less dreary books in class. I think assigning dreary books in English class is one of the cardinal sins of English teachers. I don't think Great Gatsby should ever be assigned in class. I feel strongly about that one.
I've seen a couple of people claim that, teenagers shouldn't read The Great Gatsby because the ideal time to read The Great Gatsby is after you've been out in the world and you've seen men make their fortune and then fall to ruin. And I don't know. I mean, I think that's plausible, but also I never saw any of that, and I enjoyed the book immensely. So
I could certainly see Nick's line about suddenly realizing that it was his 30th birthday and he had forgotten it until that moment of realization hit a lot harder for people who were in their late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that hit me hardest of any part of the book on rereading it, but that's because I'm in my late 20s.
I'm just embracing my late 20s. I'll get old. Eventually, I'll be 50.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, unlike Gatsby, he'll never be 50 because he got shot.
How great could he be,
the key
really?
to eternal youth.
That is. You
Maybe
never
the
see
swimming-
pictures. You know how, like, you see these pictures of really old people, and then at some point someone will pull out the one picture of them when they were 20, and everyone's like, wow, they looked pretty good back in the day. People you never see pictures, like really old pictures of? People who died when they were like 30. They're always portrayed as being young and vibrant. And
You may
everyone,
be
when they think of
onto
them, thinks of
something.
those young, vibrant pictures. So
maybe
Yeah.
the swimming pool that he died in was a symbol for the fountain of youth.
Wow.
Oh,
we should write a 5-paragraph essay on that.
that's at least a B+.
I feel that I should probably end the podcast now before I get assigned homework somehow.
Flashy will be presenting the 5-paragraph essay on Fountains of Youth, Eyes of God, and why The Great Gatsby actually is not a good book. Any arguing to the contrary will result in a low grade, possibly a failure.
Well, then it seems like it's time for me to close this meeting. Oh, the bell rang. I can't present my homework. Oh, no. All right. Well, bye, everybody.
All right, let's get out of here.
Well, guess that's a wrap then.
Yeah.